Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. First of all, I want to thank all of you for subscribing to our channel. As I always say, we're continuing to grow. We have at least 1,500 subscribers and they're growing now. So thank you for your support. Thank you for spreading the word about the podcast and telling your friends and family about it. We've got a whole bunch of people lined up. I spent the better part of last week just talking to a lot of people that I want to get on the podcast, and we're going to have a lot of different types of guests in the next 8 months. So really looking forward to that, and so I can't wait to get on the air and talk to some of these really interesting people. There'll be people not just we'll always have the leadership aspect of it, but we're also going to have some fun with it too. So stay tuned. But continue to hit the like button and the subscribe button. Please share the videos when you get a chance to. I decided today to do today's podcast in the outside. It's a beautiful day here in Las Vegas, and so I thought I'd take advantage of the weather to before it gets too hot to be able to do this out here. Also, there's a link here to the to my books, my MikeHowardAuthor.com, where you can and Amazon.com, where you can get my books. I've got 4 books out, 2 leadership books and 2 thrillers, and I'm writing the 3rd one in the Jack Trench series right now. So again, really good reviews from all of you. I'm really enjoying this and the whole aspect of writing. And that's actually the topic for today. Oh, by the way, got to give a shout out to Four Branches Bourbon, Mike Trott, a good friend of mine, former agency guy, Rick Prado, who all of you know, he was interviewed on this podcast a while ago. They're all involved with Four Branches Bourbon, which really celebrates the military. And if you're into bourbon, you definitely got to try Four Branches. And even if you're not into bourbon, check it out. They're all patriots. The folks that started Four Branches, and I get nothing, from them in terms of an endorsement, but they're friends and their colleagues are patriots, and the product is damn good. And so, check it out. What I wanted to talk to you about today was writing. It just kind of struck me today when I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to talk about. And earlier in the week, or maybe last week, things are just going by so fast. I was asked to be on an advisory board for a security company, and I politely turned it down. I've done that sort of thing before, but I remember about 2 years ago, is it now? Again, time flies. Or maybe see, I retired in 2018. We got to Las Vegas about 2019. And for that first year, 2019 to 2020, I did what a lot of people who are either former chief security officers or people who, get out of the military or intelligence services or law enforcement. What they do is they put up a shingle, establish an LLC, and actually start to do consulting. And I did that for the better part of a year. And it was okay. I got a few clients and it was interesting work. But it was interesting to me, it didn't float my boat, if you know what I mean. It was after all these years of grinding, both at the agency and at Microsoft. And I loved it. I loved the world of security. I loved the world of intelligence. I loved when I was a cop. I mean, I'm very blessed. I can say if I were to drop dead right now, I've done everything I wanted to do in life. So I'm very blessed that way. But what's interesting is in that year I was doing the security consulting, it really did not float my boat. I mean, it really didn't turn me on. When you're in business, as most of you are in, there are always constant phone calls, right? Constant meetings all the time. And it's just part of the course, right? It's just part of doing work. Is you've got these meetings all the time and the phone calls all the time, responding to emails. But it was interesting in this world of security and consulting. Even if I only had one meeting scheduled a week, I looked at the calendar for the week and said, damn. It's because it wasn't jazzed up for it. It wasn't that the people I was working for were great people. They were. It wasn't because some of the projects weren't interesting. They were. But I came to realize that just was not for me anymore. That wasn't the world I wanted to be involved in anymore. It's not like whenever security conferences come into town, I always like to get together with my former colleagues. I'm still part of a security organization of chief security officers, and you still attend the conferences and continuing to learn. But it's just not my thing anymore. I think I'm pretty good authority on security given my background, but that's not what I want to do in life anymore. And so COVID hit, and in the back of my mind, I knew I had always wanted to write a book. I always thought of myself as a writer. I always had things in my head that I wanted to get out, but I just didn't have the time or the inclination to get it done. So what I did was I took a PowerPoint, and the point of this podcast is for those of you who are aspiring to be writers. You've got something in your head that you think you want to get on paper, but you don't know if you could ever be a writer. I'm telling you my journey just so hopefully it will help spark some thoughts and maybe spur you to try to pursue writing. So when I took advantage of COVID, I took a PowerPoint that I used to give on leadership, and I put pen to paper. Now, one of the things I also did was I don't like to go into things like without any preparation. So there's an app called Masterclass, and I got the app and I invested in Masterclass. And Masterclass, if you don't know, a lot of you probably do, is like there's another app called the Great Courses, so it's sort of similar. And you've got all these world-class individuals from a lot of different parts of life. They could be actors, they could be writers, they could be artists, they could be experts on wine. Janice and I during COVID took a master class on wine given by a master of wine, and it was very interesting. But I took master class, I started taking a look at the different authors that they had teaching the classes. And I found some people that I have read and I really admired in the genre that I was interested in, which was fiction. But remember, I decided that I was going to write a leadership book first. That's why I took that leadership PowerPoint and decided to turn that into a book. But I thought, I could still glean something from people who are authors that I admired, even though initially I was writing a nonfiction book. And of course, as you know, later on I went into fiction. So I listened to Daniel Baldacci. I listened to Walter Mosley. I listened to Dan Brown, and these are great authors. They write a lot of thrillers, and I started listening to them, and they all had different aspects of how they approach writing. Some people outline, other people just go right into it. They all prepared, and their preparations were different. How they prepared for a novel, how they prepared by doing their research into certain characters, certain geographical areas, what have you. But I found it very fascinating. I found the whole thing fascinating. The main thing was to be very consistent with your writing, and so that was kind of a common theme, and get things down on paper. And they also said the very first thing all of them said was the first draft of anything they write usually sucks and ends up on the floor, which is true, which is very true. So I invested in that, and then I decided, okay, let me put pen to paper. And I didn't intend to write an autobiography. The book that I eventually came out with, called The Art of Ronin Leadership, was semi-autobiographical, because I wanted to talk about leadership from three aspects of my life: police officer in Oakland, California, the 22 years I spent at CIA, and the 16 years I spent as chief security officer at Microsoft. And I thought, hey, this gives me a framework. So that's the first thing you got to think about. What is the framework of your book? Like, how is it, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, how is it going to be laid out? There's got to be a rhythm to it, right? And so what is that rhythm? What makes sense to tell a story from A to Z, or to get teaching points from A to Z? And in my case, so I decided, okay, these were the parameters. And then I thought, okay, so there's a lot of books out there on leadership. I know I've read a lot of them. I used to share a lot of them with my leadership team. But a big part of it was, okay, so what's a different slant? So for me, the different slant was also talking about not just successes I've had in my career, but the failures where I've made a mistake, because you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. At least you should. So I made sure that as I thought through my life and I thought through the different vignettes that I wanted to talk about where something happened and it was a really great leadership lesson for me, but I did it in the aspect of things where I failed or I made a mistake, but I was able to bounce back because I had really great bosses who forgave me and saw something in me and thought, okay, this could be a lesson learned, as opposed to telling me that I sucked and that not just don't do it again, but you how could you do this? You're terrible, blah blah blah. Leaving your ego shattered. So I thought, okay, this is a really great aspect. This is okay. So then I started putting pen to paper, and I started writing. And through a mutual friend, I ended up meeting a woman who's a dear friend now, named Judith Briles. They call her the Book Shepherd. I mentioned her before many times. All my books have, you'll see the Book Shepherd on there. She helps independent writers decide or work with them to write books. And let me take a step back too. That's the other thing you as a budding writer need to think about. There are two ways to go about writing. You can go through a publishing house, and there are the major publishing houses like I think Random House and all the others, like four of them in kind of in the New York City area. There are other independent publishing houses, or do you want to go independent? There's pros and cons to both. I have never gone the route of the traditional publishing houses, because while they can take care of a lot of things, soup to nuts, from marketing to promotion, and they take care of a lot of the stuff for you. Problem with going that route is they actually own your content. So if there are things in there that you don't like, you really want to have that in your book, they have the right to say, nah, we got to take it out, otherwise we won't publish. I didn't want that. I wanted to be more independent. What I wrote was what I wanted to get out there into the world. So I'm part of a group of, probably thousands, if not millions, of independent writers. And I've gone this route, and I like it. I like the independence. Now there's more heavy lifting on your part to find the people that can do the editing, and they can do the book covers and the illustrations and all these other kinds of things, and the marketing, etc. That's on you to push, but that's okay. It's also great to learn, and so that's the way I went. But you guys have to figure out, if you decide you want to become a writer, then what are the two routes? And I would say explore it. There's all kinds of YouTube videos out there, which I explored. I learned a lot about both worlds. And I'm not saying that someday I wouldn't take a book and try to go the not the regular route, but the traditional route of going through a publishing house. But for now, I'm enjoying in the independent writing sort of direction. The people I've met a whole ecosystem of independent writers, and it's just fun to talk to them. And it's not about making money, not, at least not for me. It's about writing for the joy of writing and just getting your content out there. But that's something you got to think about. So I wrote my first draft, and with Judith, got to know her. And I remember one of the first things she said was, "You can't write, can't you?" Oh, that's kind of a blow to your ego. I've written my whole life, business things, business proposals, messages to the troops, etc. So I thought, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm a pretty good writer. Well, in those contexts, I was. When it comes to writing for business, writing to your troops, inspirational things, blah blah blah. Yeah, I'm pretty good at it. When it came to writing book, I sucked. There were things that I remember. For instance, just grammatical things. Like, you remember, for those of us of a certain age, when you learned English, when you came to the end of a sentence, there was a period and a space. So when I wrote my first draft, it was a period and a space. And she said, "We don't do that anymore. It's period and space." And I looked it up, and you're right. They're right. And I said, "When did that happen?" I don't know, 20 years ago. Who knew, right? Little things like that. So typical of what I learned from watching Masterclass with the greats like Baldacci or uh, Dan Brown and all these others, Walter Mosley. You might as well take the first draft and just throw it in the shredder, or throw it on the ground. But that's okay. Part of being a writer is you got to keep your ego in check, because whether it's the person that's working with you on editing, whether it's your spouse, Janice is my number one editor, and so you got to put your ego in check for that. All along the way, people are going to be looking at your work. They're going to be critiquing it, or whether it's a reviewer or what have you. So what you have to do is make sure you keep an open mind. You can't be so like, well, this is my work, and it's perfect. No, it isn't perfect, especially your first draft. Your first draft is going to suck. That's just the way it is. Um, but over a period of time, it'll get better. And so working with Judith on that first book was really awesome, because it was a learning experience for me. First time writer, and learning the nuances of language, learning what would capture people's attention. Things like, one of the things I remember when I read a book, and I read like an action novel or something like that, I hate long, drawn out paragraphs. I hate long chapters. I want to get to the point, right? Or I hate it when an author is describing a room to so much detail that you're almost like, okay, I understand it. The walls are blue, and the door handles were made of gold, and the carpet, blah blah. But after a while, it's like there's too much detail, or the paragraphs are too long, or the chapters are too long. So one of the things I remembered was brevity. And the feedback I've gotten from a lot of people in the books that I've written is that they liked it because the chapters were short, the paragraphs were short, it kept people's attention. And so, again, it depends on the kind of writer you are. But I have learned that for me, brevity works for me. And so that's a lesson I learned from Judith. So we started paring down chapters, and and the thing is, she and I, and we're still doing it to this day on books that I'm writing. We'll have sessions. We'll go 2-3 hours, and we're going line by line. And I've written something, and she'll edit it, and we'll discuss it, leave it in, take it out. And again, it's a cool process, because it's like anything else you do in life. It's like refining, right? It's like martial arts. You're not to be great right off the bat, but over a period of time, you hone your skill your moves are crisp, um, you're able to anticipate, and you become to the point where you're actually a master, or you're really good at martial arts. Well, it takes time to hone the craft of writing. So be patient, okay, and be willing to take the criticism. But anyway, I worked with her, and we started really getting into the flow of things in terms of my experiences at Oakland PD, CIA, and Microsoft. She learned a lot too. She was learning a lot about my life. And the other thing is that be creative. Think about things. So as we were looking at the art of Ronin leadership, and even the subsequent book, the art of executing Ronin leadership strategies. One of the things that she came up with that I incorporate now, even in my fiction books, is you'll have your title, or chapter number, whatever it is, and something in that chapter, a sentence, um, you put at the top as a kind of a teaser, right? If it's a fiction thing, um, it would be something like, uh, and Trench knew that he was never going to turn back, or something like that. Something that uh, captures your attention to whatever the chapter is. And then there are things on the sides that Judith started doing, which I like, which are taking snippets from the chapter and popping in on a side block on the side of the page, and kind of a little block, again, as a teaser. Especially this works a lot in your nonfiction, like in the leadership books, as teaching points. So you not only do you have the actual chapters and the words in those chapters, but you have something highlighted at the beginning, which kind of is a teaser, and you have things along the way, not too many, but just a couple, that kind of leads the reader to think, oh, that's interesting. Let me go take a look at what this thing is. The other thing that I'm proud of, that I came up on my own as I was writing this, and I remember it was heck, it must have been winter time here, because it was 5 o'clock, and it was already dark here, and I was in my office and the lights were on, and I was trying to think, I need a kick. I need something else besides what we're doing now. Something more imaginative, because we've got a really good product that we're putting together. And so I looked around my library behind me, and I saw the Book of Five Rings, written by Miyamoto Musashi. A lot of you know who Musashi is, some of you may not, but he was the most prolific samurai swordsman in ancient Japan, carried two swords, never was defeated in battle, very innovative in his fighting techniques. But more than that, or just as important as that, Musashi was a philosopher, and he wrote a lot of books, and one of them was the Book of Five Rings, which talked a lot about his philosophy of martial arts and sword fighting and being a samurai. And it's sort of like Sun Tzu and the Art of War. They're very similar. So I thought, okay, the Art of Ronin leadership, Ronin, masterless samurai, and we came up with that title because as Judith and I were noodling on the title for the book, I thought about, okay, she said, tell me something about yourself. This is when we're starting to get to know each other. And this is what you need to do as an author. Be introspective, right? And think about, as you're writing titles for books, or, blah, 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 what's the meaning? What's the significance behind it, whether it's fiction or nonfiction? So I told her about myself and a lot about my martial arts background and how I'm half Japanese, and that really helped inform my life as it does today. And I happened to mention, like, I showed it my very first tattoo, which is this one, which means Ronin, masterless samurai. So we started to noodle on that a little bit, and it came to an epiphany. So she said, explain more about Ronin. It's a masterless samurai. So you used to work for a master, a shogun or what have you, but now I gave her the whole history of what it meant to be a Ronin back in the day. So we came up with the idea, okay, so as a leader, you use your leadership journey, you learn, you grow, you make mistakes, you pick yourself up, continue to learn and grow until you become a really great leader. And then you're masterless because you're now forming your own leadership style, your own way of leadership, gleaning from the mentors and people you had behind you that helped you to get to where you are. So that was it. That's how we got the Art of Ronin Leadership. And so I thought, okay, that's a great thing. So I grabbed the Book of Five Rings and I started going through it, and I'd read it before, but now I'm really looking at it, and I would find teaching points. Like I think, like I would find things such as uh, where Musashi talks about, you know, not leaving. I'll try to paraphrase this. So as you may be going into battle, or not battle, but let's say if you're having relationships, that you remember that as a samurai you can kill, but you can still nurture proper relationships. And so what was interesting was uh, when I look at what we were writing, and one aspect was leaders shouldn't leave dead bodies in their wake, and you've heard that term before, which is okay. So I'm a leader, so-called leader in this case, and I get the job done, but I have chopped all of my direct reports off at the knees. I make them feel like crap. I don't. I'm not nurturing them. I'm not mentoring them. All I care about is I'm getting the job done, and I don't care if I leave a lot of dead bodies in my wake. So I thought, hey, there's some parallels here. So I would take phrases that Musashi said, or wrote in the Book of Five Rings, and pop them at the top of the paragraphs, the chapters. And it was great. It turned out to be great because it was fun for me to kind of marry up different aspects of the Book of Five Rings to the teaching points I was trying to make in the Art of Ronin Leadership, and my second book too. It was really awesome, and I remember being taking sticky notes, and I would chapter 8, and then I would have that corresponding chapter on the Book of Five Rings, so I could always make sure I could refer back to those things. Also, to make sure I wasn't reusing um, the same phrases from the Book of Five Rings into the Art of Ronin Leadership. So that in itself was really fun, and it lended a lot to the book. And so one of the things that I would think for you as you're writing your book, again, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or you just use your imagination. Put yourself in the mind of the reader. What are the things that would turn a reader on, right? In terms of as they're reading your book, what is it that's going to capture their attention? Some of these things, where you have things at the beginning of the paragraph, boxes at the side, things that kind of stand out, are things that are going to differentiate your book, maybe from someone else's book, and keep the reader engaged. So put yourself in that mindset. So as you're writing, you have to always make sure you have two hats on. You have the writing hat, and then you have the reader hat. You're both, and make sure that it passes, the smell test. Um, the Now, in terms of the actual writing itself, I don't outline. I'm one of the writers. I don't outline. In my head, I have kind of outlined where I want to go, where I want to start with, and where I want to go. The middle part is that area where I'm going to find myself in the process of writing, and it works for me. Um, I tried to outline in the past, but at the beginning, and it just doesn't work for me. So I am of the kind of writer that I like to freeform it knowing the beginning and the end. Now so I don't, like I said, I don't outline, but if it works for you, fine. You need to find your own style. Just figure out what works for you, and have a sense of again, study. You know, if you don't do master class, there are other things out there. A lot of YouTube videos on writing, but just figure out what works for you. So for me, I have a concept, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I know the beginning where I want to start. I know roughly at the end, and the middle. I'm gonna figure it out along the way. Um, Also, you also need to think about, and I didn't initially, but I realize now that my books are not going to be super long. Whether it's leadership or whether it's fiction, I write for people like me. Now, that may not be the right thing, but I write for people like me who want to get to the point. Um, and so, one of the things that you have to think about is how long do you think you want the book to be? Some people just want to write, and after a while, you're going to lose people, right? You just will. You will lose a lot of people. Uh, People's attention spans are relatively short, so just figure out how long you want. And a lot of times, this is just going to happen organically. You're going to write, and in the process of editing, you're going to get rid of a lot of stuff, and then you'll come out with the product that's just the right size for you. Um, be rigorous in writing. Be consistent. That's the main thing. Whether you write a page a day, 2 pages a day, whether you take a day or two out of the week to write, figure out your own rhythm. A lot of writers write every day. I don't. I don't write every day because I've got other things to do. Some writers, this is the only thing they do is write, and for them, they should write every day. For me, I blog, and I've got other activities on my plate, so I don't have the time to write every day. So I carve out different parts of the week to write. But when I write, I write. I'll do 3-4 hours straight and just write. Uh, and you get in the zone. You need to find a place where you can write without distractions. You need to find out where that place is, but you need to find a place. And the other thing is that one of the things I have learned, now this is especially if you're writing fiction. My wife gave me a wonderful present a couple years ago, and it's called a character book. And what it is that as I was writing my first fiction novel, Full Circle, maybe I would write my protagonist Jack Trench's characteristics. 6'5", 220, he's got a scar on his face, blah, blah, blah. And as I go on throughout the book, maybe I described him as, uh, 6'4", something. I mean, I wasn't consistent. And I remember in the process of editing, I realized, okay, so writing down characters, their characteristics, how they look, what their background is. Janice gave me a really good. So I keep book on all the characters. So as I refer to characters either in the same book or book to book. In the second book, um, Blood Promise, when I have to describe these characters again, I've got them all down there. So I'm not. So I don't have to like make trying to remember. Okay, how did I describe Jack Trench? How did I describe BJ? I can just go back and I've got all that there. So whether it's that or something, have a system where you're not having to waste time trying to remember what you wrote in the past. If they're pertinent things, put them in a book, put them in a notebook, something that you can refer to, something that's easy for you to get back to, because that's really important. Um, so as you're in the process of writing and you're in the process of editing, and eventually you get to the point where you're refining your product and it's really sounding good, you're going to get into a flow. Trust me. When I was trying to write my first fiction novel, I I decided to make the protagonist be former CIA, but had it in Las Vegas. And he was working at a bouncer at a club. And I had this story in my head, but as I was showing it to Janice, even I knew as I wrote it, I was trying to make things happen, like putting a square peg into a round hole. And she would say, it's not working. There's something not there. And then she just said, why don't you write what you know? So I tore that up and I started writing in the aspect of a former CIA officer who's older, retired, gets called back into action, and has to bring some of his old teammates back together to do something. And as I started writing that, holy smokes, man, it started to flow. Even with all the edits and all the kind of stuff, it just started to flow. The story just started to take shape. And the protagonist, it was easier to write the good guys and the bad guys and all these other characters because they're people that I'd dealt with before. I knew this world. I could talk about it and writing about it. And even the dialogue came more naturally. And I'll get into dialogue in a little bit. And it just worked. Man, it worked. So really, it was really, really cool. And so write what you know, and you'll know it. You'll just instinctively know whether or not it's a square peg in a round hole. If you try to make shit up and then you have to think back. And so, no. Whether it's the nonfiction, which is actually easier, should be easier because you're not making stuff up. This is real stuff, so you should be able to put it together. But especially if you're writing fiction, when you'll know it's right because it's just the story's coming out and you're feeling good to the point where when you're writing, you look at the clock and can't believe that hours have passed by because you're into it so much. You're really into it. Dialogue. So I've become pretty good at dialogue, and thanks to Judith. But dialogue is something that if you're going to write fiction, especially, you really need to pay attention to dialogue. And there are nuances about dialogue where there are times when you could say, blah, 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 Trench said, or you don't have to say that because you know that it's Trench speaking. It doesn't have to be every sentence Trench said, or Lucy said. So one of the things with dialogue, and you're gonna have to have dialogues when you're writing fiction, is again, put yourself in the position of just transporting yourself as you're writing the dialogue, the piece, putting yourself in that scenario. How would you speak? What's your cadence? What would the other person's response be? So you're not writing it from an abstract point of view. You're writing it from the point of view of you actually being there, having the conversation. And then you can, to me, I find that easier as I'm writing the dialogue. If Jack Trench is talking to somebody or the bad guy's talking to somebody, I'm putting myself in that situation and I'm there. And so that way the dialogue comes out more naturally. And whatever slang words you use or whatever, whatever other things that you use to get your point across, it's natural. It takes time and you got to refine it. I'm still refining mine. But once you get into it, it's pretty cool because there's this, you can really get into repartee and back and forth and witticisms. But again, to be authentic is to speak the way you would speak. When you speak from the aspect of a bad guy or a bad gal, you have to put yourself in their shoes. And part of that as a writer is, and this is where a lot of your thinking and research is going to come into. The worst thing you could have in fiction, especially, is have a cardboard bad guy or bad girl. Just bad because they're bad. There has to be backstory. And so for all of my bad guy, bad girl characters, there is a backstory. to why they got to where they are. They still need to be put down and killed eventually or put in jail, but it gives you context. So, and then that context lends itself to the way they speak, right? And the way they, how they, what's their attitude towards the world, right? Why do they not care what they're doing and how they're hurting other people, innocent people? What is it about their background that led them to do that? I mean, this is not like Dr. Evil kind of thing, you know, in Austin Powers. This takes thought. So as you're writing your characters out, you have to really go in depth into each of the characters, the main characters. That will help you in your writing too, because as you're writing particular scenes and stuff like that, it will ring true because that's what that person would do, right? If someone grew up like my protagonist, my main enemy in Blood Promise, Manisi, grew up in Mozambique in the slums with an abusive father, and who used to beat him and his brother and sister and mother all the time until Manisi was strong enough to fight back. The guy was his father was also a low-level drug dealer, and so he grew up in that milieu. And eventually, Manisi ended up killing his father, protecting his mother, but then took over his father's drug trade, and then which led him up the chain of command, right? And so while the things that he does, like human trafficking and all these other things that take place in the book, while they're reprehensible, it's not that you can understand why he does, but you know where he's coming from. You know why he's so ruthless, and why he's so tenacious. And so you need to build that into your characters as you're writing your novel, and so just be cognizant of that. So again, in the process of writing, at some point you're going to come to an end. You'll know when it's there, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, because you got to know there's nothing left in the tank. There's nothing more to say. Don't try to add on anything more. I don't care if you think that if it's this big or this big. When you get there, you get there. And then you really need to be patient in terms of the whole editing process. You need to read your work. If most of us are going to do it online, right? But you need to print up. I know I'm killing a lot of trees here, but print up your book and then go through it line by line, page by page, as if you're reading a book. You'll find all kinds of stuff that you miss. Even when you use Microsoft Word, the whole editing thing, you're still going to miss some things. But that's all part of the refinement. And you need to refine over and over again. In my case, you know, I do an edit, Janice does an edit, Judith does an edit, Judith sends it out to somebody else, to maybe one or two people to edit until, so you get different eyes on it. And then you kind of work collaboratively to delete, add, you know, correct until you get it to where it needs to be. And then you're ready, right? You're ready to get it published. And if you're an independent publisher, writer like me, you have developed resources. Like I have people, a great person that does all the cover art and the interior art and all the things that make the book look beautiful. And you know, through Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, there is a mechanism where you can put your manuscript and your cover on there, and they'll go ahead and publish it and put it on the website, right? And so it's a process. But I guess the point of this whole video is that if you are interested in writing, don't let, you know, it looks daunting initially, like, man, I could never. First of all, who's going to want to listen to what I have to say? Trust me. There are people out there are going to listen to what you have to say. We all have a voice. And so whatever your voice is and whatever you want to get out there, people want to hear it. So you need to give it a shot, but you need to prepare. So, you know, go to YouTube or Masterclass or great courses. Study the people in the genre of writing that you are interested in writing about, or the genre that you want to be involved in. Study, take notes, decide if you want to outline or not, and how you want what is it conceptually you want to get across, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what is it you want to accomplish with your book? With my leadership books, I wanted to A, tell them my journey in leadership, B, show them the mistakes I made and you can still be successful, and C, tell them the importance of having mentors, and D, that it's never ending, that this is a continuous journey. And so I think between my first two books, first one was more of a 1,000-foot view from my experiences. The other second book was more of a how to build teams, how to get budget, the strategies that worked for me and my team back in Microsoft. But again, there was a goal. I knew what I wanted to get across. So what is the goal that you want to get across in your books? Great. No, it's number one. And then number two, there's no getting around it. Start putting pen to paper. Start writing. And remember that your first iteration is going to end up on the ground at some point because it's not going to be good, but it gets a framework. Find a good editor. Find people, not just relatives and stuff like that, which are important, but find someone that knows what they're doing. A good editor. They're out there that will work with you. That'll give you the straight skinny, because you need truth. You don't want someone telling you that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like, hey, you're the next Lee Child, right? On your very first novel. Nah, it happens once in a while, but not often. Like most writers slog it out for years and years and years before they even get discovered. And so find good editors who can go through your book and help you as you write the book. Find people who've written books and talk to them. Get a mentor. I've got Judith. Get people that you know or that you can find that can help you in your writing endeavors so that you can get to where you want to go. The other thing is, again, take the time to write. Have the discipline of writing, whether it's every day or every other day or whatever parts of the week. Do it, stick to it. Don't deviate from that. Research. Do your research. If it's nonfiction, then obviously your research is going into your data banks and making sure you're pulling out those stories, those vignettes, those experiences that happened, and make sure that you're telling it accurately. If it's fiction, do your research on the countries that your story is taking place in. I mean, I even got to the minutia of, as I'm writing the first one, Full Circle, and I'm talking about Jack Trench's apartment in Monterey, California. I said it in Monterey because I grew up in Monterey. I know that turf very well, but I even researched. I was trying to think about, so Jack Trench likes bourbon. He probably has a bar cart. So I talked about a bar cart. What I did was I went to our bar cart and I measured it out and I looked at it, took pictures of it just to make sure, and I had it there as kind of a reference point. So as I described how what it was made of and how big it was, et cetera, and they had glass and what was on it. Again, that was minor research. There are times when I'll go into weapon systems. I know a lot of weapon systems, but I don't know all of them. So I'll go into, if a particular organization or group or person is using a weapon system, I need to research that, especially if I'm going back in time. And so Trench and his team are back in the 90s or the 80s. All right, so what weapon systems were employed then, right? Or cars. Like if I have Jack Trench and his team, in Gabon in the 1980s or 90s, what cars were used or driven in Gabon during that time? I mean, I can't have a car from 2024 being there. So those are the things you have to think about, as you're writing, especially fiction. You need to think about as you're doing research. So research meticulously to make sure that when someone reads your book and they check it out and say, hey, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the Toyota didn't even make this brand back in 1984 or whatever it was. Got to be consistent, right? So do your research. Take the time to do the research. The editing is a constant process. Put your ego to the side because you need a lot of eyes to look at your work to make sure that what comes out at the end is the best work it can be. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you're going to decide whether you want to publish through a publishing house, whether it's one of the big ones or the independent smaller ones, or do your own independent publishing through Amazon. And I think Apple also has their own kind of mechanism too. But do your research on that too. Figure out what works for you. Doesn't mean just because you did one book this way, you can't do another book the other way, right? And then I guess the final thing is when it comes to reviews, not everybody's going to like your book. Hopefully most people will. Not everybody's going to like it, but that's okay. Everybody's got their point of view, right? You are writing because you have something to say. You have a story to tell, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you have a story to tell and you want to get it out there. There will be an audience for it, but there will some people that read it and say, yeah, they don't like it for whatever reason. That's okay. All the great writers of all time have always had rejections, and they still do right nowadays. No matter even if they've had like 20 bestsellers on the New York Times bestselling list. Just remember, you're writing because for the joy of writing and to get something out to the people. You're doing it for internal gratification, right? As long as you're happy with what you put out there, that's all that matters, right? Write for the right reasons. If you're aspiring to be a writer to make money, that's a harder road. But again, if that's the reason you want to do it, go for it. Go do it. If you're like me and you write just because I want to write and I just enjoy it, then recognize that, and that's fine. And whatever makes you happy, right? You'll find out that after you get that first book out, it's such an accomplishment. When you first hold up that book in hardback or paperback, and you realize that this is your work, you realize that you've done something that most people will never do. Some people don't want to, they don't have the desire. Other people feel like it's too daunting. But most people will never be an author. And so you've now done something that most people haven't done. It's an accomplishment, right? It's no different than I'm looking over there the other side of the yard with the cold plunge, and I talk about cold plunge a lot, as you know. I cold plunge because it helps me out physically, mentally, resilience, all those things I talk about. But I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm doing something that most people will never do because they don't want to do it, because it's painful and it's onerous, it's uncomfortable. Well, writing can be painful and onerous and uncomfortable at times. Ultimately, when I come out of that cold plunge, I feel better because I've accomplished something. I know something positive for myself as a human being. You finish that book with all the pain and struggle of the writing and the editing and the re-editing and blah, 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 and getting it published and, finding the right people to do the covers and, figure out how to market, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, when you hold up that book, you've done something that most people in life will never do. And that's a great accomplishment. So that's all I have for you today. I can talk about this forever, but I just wanted to seed the idea for those of you that are interested in being writers, kind of in a short period of time, my journey of writing, why I write, and what makes it enjoyable for me, the process that I went through. You'll all go through your own process, but you'll figure it out. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. And let me know if you've decided based on this podcast that you're going to try your hand at writing. Give it a shot. And until next time, remember, make sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button. Please share this video. Tell people about it. And continue to leave your comments. And I thank you for your support. The other thing is there'll be a link here, as always, to my Ronin Leadership Thoughts blog, which is on LinkedIn. Check that out too. And also, please check out my books, MikeHowardAuthor.com, Amazon.com. You'll find all my books there as well. So till next time, we'll talk at you.